Hello, podheads, and welcome back to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. This is your host for today, Kate Carter.
I'm Kylie Cole.
And I'm Holly Spear.
And we're back, babies. You probably don't know this story, but you might because it's more of a recent case. I didn't know it until I started doing some research on it. So, per usual, we're just going to dive right in. This is the case of Katelyn Markham. Katelyn Markham was born on August 16th, 1989 in Fairfield, Ohio. Fairfield is like this cute little neighborhood-ish town that's about 30 minutes away from Cincinnati. So to give you a geography. So Katelyn was adopted. Her adoptive dad, I'm going to call him Daddy Dave throughout the whole story, and his wife had been trying for like a long time to have a kid. They weren't successful. And at some point, they got word that a local couple got pregnant, weren't going to keep their baby. So the Markhams were like, we'll take it, which is pretty nice and neat because the couple was still pregnant when this happened. So when Katelyn was born, her Daddy Dave and the fiance or the wife at the time were able to be there when she was born in the hospital, which is cool. The Markhams were pretty head over heels for their new daughter and vice versa. Katelyn kind of never knew anything different from day one. Growing up, Katelyn was a pretty artistic child. From a young age, used to carry around a notebook of drawings and would always be found doing like art projects in her free time. She was very artistic. And when she was around 6 years old, her parents had another child. Now, I couldn't figure out if this kid was adopted as well or if they were able to have her naturally, but it didn't really matter because they, just like when they brought Katelyn home for the first time, when they brought home this new little daughter, it was like love at first sight all over again. So this little girl's name is Allie. So you've got Katelyn and then Allie. They were best friends from day one, even though they had a 6 year age gap. So when Katelyn was in high school, unfortunately, her parents separated, but Daddy Dave ended up taking full custody of the girls and supported them on his own full time. But regardless of her parents' divorce, Katelyn still had a really good high school education and she did really good in her social life. She made good grades. She was continuing to pursue her passion for the arts. And at this point, she had a pretty tight knit group of friends. When Katelyn was a junior, she met a fellow student named John Carter. Now, John was a senior at school, but they had mutual friends in like their friend group and had kind of always grown up together in the same like area friend group. So they always knew each other. But as the two hung out more and more, it was quite obvious to everyone that they had like little crushes on each other and they kind of just started dating from there. So once Katelyn graduated from high school, she began attending the Art Institute of Cincinnati and she worked a part-time job at the school and also a part-time job at a local David's Bridal, and she fully supported herself. On the other hand, boyfriend John was still living with his parents back in Fairfield, and he was a delivery driver for Papa John's. So after year 5 of them dating, John proposed to Katelyn. Of course, she said yes. And they decided to make plans of moving to Colorado together in a few years once Katelyn had graduated from college. In August 2011, just a few weeks before Katelyn's graduation, she was living back at her family's house in Fairfield with her dad and stepmom had moved out. And she had a dog that she lived with named Murphy. And John, for the most part, spent nights and days at Katelyn's house because his parents' house was actually only a 10-minute walk away. So they were really close. On August 12th, there was this little cute festival in town. It was called the Sacred Heart Festival. And Katelyn and John had attended it together with some of their friends. But while they were at the festival, multiple people noticed that there was very high tension between the two of them, which was super out of the norm. Like normally they were both super chill people, very touchy feely, like head over heels for each other, even 6 years later, kind of thing. But according to the friend group, they had even gotten into a bickering fight because John had purchased a large amount of raffle tickets at this festival, even though Katelyn had told him not to, like a few $100s worth of raffle tickets. And which, like, I get if you're potentially having like money issues or something, and then your partner goes and like blows monies on raffle tickets, like I'd be a little pissed too, but I don't know to what extent. I mean, it ain't my money. But according to the friends, it seemed like Katelyn was really upset and she actually ended up leaving on her own and walking home. The next day, August 13th, John got off work early and had planned on meeting one of his friends, Brad, back at Katelyn's house around 9 p.m. So when Brad arrived at Katelyn's house, he said that she was acting super weird. She was being very distant and quiet. And once John arrived, apparently him and Brad smoked a bunch of weed and then ended up watching a movie together. And Caitlyn's like just in the room watching the movie with them, which is like, I can just picture it in my head. But once Brad left after the movie, he stopped at his own house and then headed to another friend's house for a party. Fiance John, which I'm going to call him Fiance John for the rest of the story so it doesn't get confusing, but Fiance John later said he hung out at Caitlyn's for a few more hours, but then was planning on leaving to go to this party with some friends. And apparently Caitlyn wasn't going to the party because she had work the next morning. So she was like kind of pissed John was going to go without her. That's all according to John. So Fiance John left Caitlyn's house around 11:30 p.m., went to this party, then went back to his parents' house at 2 a.m. and watched TV on his computer in bed until 4 a.m. And around 4 a.m., he texted Caitlyn, "Good morning," and then went to bed. So I don't know if maybe like Caitlyn woke up really early for work or stuff like that, but he texted her good morning and then he went to sleep.
I'm sure it was, I'm going to bed at 4 a.m. I'm definitely going to be asleep when you wake up. So I'm just going to,
Right. Text you now so you don't get in trouble.
yep.
Homeboy fiance John ended up not waking up until 4 p.m. Sounds about right, on August 14th. So he woke up, got ready for work. But I guess when he woke up, he was immediately concerned about Caitlyn because apparently she never had responded
Yeah.
to his good morning text and hadn't contacted him at all, which was kind of out of the norm for her. But, you know, she was a pissed off girlfriend. So maybe she just didn't want to text him. Regardless of all of that, John went to work. But around halfway through his shift, he asked his manager if he could go check in on Caitlyn because he still hadn't heard from her. On his way to Caitlyn's house, fiance John called her dad, Daddy Dave, and said Caitlyn's missing. Now, Caitlyn's dad, Daddy Dave, started trying to call Caitlyn and her friends, but wasn't able to get any details on like where she could be, who had seen her last, like any of that. So Daddy Dave even called Caitlyn's work, who told him that she was a no-show, no-call for her shift, which obviously raised immediate concerns for Daddy Dave because that was something Caitlyn has never done before and wouldn't do. At 8 p.m. that night, which was still August 14th, Caitlyn couldn't be found. She wasn't in her house. So Caitlyn's dad, Dave, met up with fiance John at the townhouse, and that's when John called 911.
Fiance is missing. I can't find her anywhere.
The day after friends and family realized that Katelyn Markham wasn't responding to calls or text messages, her fiance called 911.
I saw her at like 12 o'clock last night. She stays in a house by herself. I'm really nervous. Her car is still there. I have been trying to get a hold of her, and I decided to go by her house to see if she was okay. And her car was still there. She would be at work right now with her car, which is why I'm like really freaking out.
John Carter, Markham's boyfriend of 6 years, recounts to 911 operators what Markham was doing when he last saw her around 11:30 Saturday night.
Where was she at midnight last night when you left?
She was at her house. She was going to bed. She wasn't going out to do anything, so she would have been in her bed. And I mean, I've been with her for 6 years. She's not deceiving, you know. She doesn't.
Okay, and you guys didn't have an argument or anything?
Not at all.
Carter then tells 911 operators about the Sacred Heart Festival that was being held here at the Sacred Heart Church in Fairfield near Markham's apartment. He voices concerns about the crowd.
The only thing that's not there is her cell phone, which is positive, but she's not answering it. So, and the Sacred Heart Festival is going on right up the street, and there's a lot of questionable people there.
So the Fairfield police met John and Daddy Dave at the house. And when Caitlyn's dad opened up her bedroom door, which was closed, Caitlyn's dog Murphy was found inside. So he had been like locked inside her bedroom. And not only was that like totally out of the norm, but Murphy had also used the bathroom in her bedroom multiple times. It is not normal for a dog to use the bathroom multiple times unless they're pissed or they've been in there for a really long time. Other than the Murphy situation, Caitlyn's house looked pretty normal. The only thing that everyone said could have been seen as an out of normal thing was some of her art supplies in her bedroom had been knocked over. But other than that, everything looked the same according to fiance John, and it didn't look like a struggle had taken place according to the police. In her kitchen, the police found Caitlyn's purse, And in the purse was her driver's license, and there was money in her wallet. Oh, and not to mention, Katelyn's car was still parked outside the house. So the only thing that was actually missing was Katelyn and her phone. So one of the Fairfield police officers, named Officer Sandy Spears, pretty much began contacting Katelyn's friends and investigating, even though like a missing persons report hadn't even been filed, basically, but she hopped on the case. One friend she contacted, who she immediately got bad vibes from, was a friend named John Palmerton, not to be confused with Fiance John. So I'm going to say friend John, Fiance John. Friend John had lived down the street from Katelyn, so he grew up knowing her too, but he was also BFFs with Fiance John. Now, Officer Spears couldn't say why she was suspicious of friend John, but she immediately got bad vibes from him, and she reported her suspicions to her station. So back at the station, the Fairfield police are unsure if this point, if it was a crime had been committed, or like, is Katelyn just like a runaway? Did she need some time on her own? Like, was she even missing? The only thing that the police could start to investigate was Katelyn's phone being gone, as Fiance John said it wasn't at the house. So investigators found out that Katelyn's phone had actually been turned off since midnight the night before, which was about 30 minutes after her fiance John had left the house to go to his friend's party. Now, back at the police station, they were speaking to Daddy Dave and had been asking him questions on whether or not like Katelyn had been stressed out lately. Could she have left on her own? Maybe she needed a break. But according to Daddy Dave, he knew like that wasn't a possibility. He was very adamant that Katelyn would never have just left and not told anyone. And after Daddy Dave left the police station, him and others from the community immediately began searching the local neighborhood for Katelyn just to see if she was like nearby or at someone else's house. They were looking for pretty much any sign of her or where she could have gone at this point, but Daddy Dave pretty much immediately said he needed to step down from the search. He said his head was swimming all over the place, just imagining like what could have happened to Katelyn or what could be happening to her. And because of that, he wasn't able to like search for like fine-tuned details, which honestly, I was thinking about this too. Like we say this in a lot of our cases, you never know how you're going to react until it's you. And like if my daughter was missing, I would say right now, like, oh, I'd be out there leading the fight, leading the charge. Would I? Or would I be freaking the fuck out at home, crying my eyes out in a closet?
Like paralyzed.
Yeah. So while people in the community were out and about looking for Katelyn, good old Officer Spears was still following up with some of Katelyn's friends and neighbors trying to find any answers. A neighbor that was a few houses down told Officer Spears that they remember some quote unquote suspicious people being in front of Katelyn's house on the night that she disappeared. Now, according to this neighbor, these people didn't fit the neighborhood, had tattoos, and were standing around an older car that the neighbor had never seen. Now we have to remember, like we said before, the festival was happening down the street, the Sacred Hearts Festival. So investigators were thinking like maybe it was potentially outsiders who had parked their car in the neighborhood and like had just come and go for the festival. Maybe one of them ran into Katelyn and something happened, or they could have been the reason for her disappearance. But according to Fiance John and Daddy Dave and the police, there was no signs of forced entry into the house, and the entire house had been locked. But her keys and everything were in the house.
I mean, the only thing I could think of is like if she took the dog out, but the dog was inside the house.
Right. In her bedroom with the door closed, which wasn't normal, which means somebody had keys to her house.
Right. And locked when they left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2 days after Katelyn's disappearance on August 16th, which also happened to be her birthday, there was a massive gathering in town to support Katelyn's family and friends and fiance John. So let's talk about John, good old Johnny boy. He was obviously the last person to see Katelyn. Like he was even the one that publicly said that. So it wasn't, he made it public knowledge that he was the last person to see her. But other than the obvious, John was very outspoken to the police and the media about Katelyn's disappearance, and he pretty much constantly advocated for her return. Obviously, the police were going to investigate him right off the bat, just like they should, because he was the partner, but also she was last seen with him. When investigated, fiance John told the police the same timeline that we previously went over, how he had gone to her house that night, friend Brad came over, fiance John left around 11:30. But funny enough, he never mentioned to the investigators that him and Katelyn had gotten into a big fight the day before at the festival with friends. But he did say that they had gotten into a fight a few weeks prior, and he couldn't remember what the fight was about. Right from the beginning, John was super adamant that he had nothing to do with Katelyn's disappearance and that he would do anything for her to come back home, especially safely. And John even let investigators go through his phone, his computer, his house, everything. So he was like super cooperative, and he was pretty open about everything and helped the police in any way they needed. As for fiance John's alibi, because he was supposed to be at a party that night, he did have people say that he was there at the party from about midnight until about 1:45 a.m. ish. And then his computer, they were able to pull up the records, and it did show that he was back at his home in his bedroom from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. and that he had been watching a TV show. I think he was watching like Suits or something like that. The Fairfield police pretty much said fiance John was good to go and everything about him was checking out, like his alibi was good. But John did pass along the name of a former colleague of Katelyn's, whose name was Ryan Ball, and told the investigators to look into him. Now this Ryan dude, weirdo, total weirdo. He was literally known in town for being a creepy person, and he liked to mess with girls and freak them out.
So a pervert.
Yeah, yes. I think a nice name for pervert. And apparently Ryan had tried to flirt with Katelyn multiple times in the past and was constantly reaching out to her on social media, like trying to hang out. But apparently Katelyn had always shut down Ryan. He knew she was in a relationship, and Katelyn made it quite clear that she was not interested. So it wasn't until this point in the investigation that anyone actually knew this, but Ryan was a registered sex offender, which we love. He literally was a perv. He had solicited sex from a minor and was in jail because he also violated his parole. And that happened actually a week after Katelyn went missing. So he was around when Katelyn went missing. Of course, when Ryan was brought in for questioning, he denied any and all involvement in Katelyn's disappearance. And he ended up getting pretty pissed off about the fact that people were looking at him as the potential bad guy. Ryan even told investigators that the last time he had physically seen Katelyn was at high school graduation, which had been years ago, and that he hadn't messaged her since. And funny enough, this was actually confirmed through their social medias. So Ryan is like cleared. The investigation's going nowhere at this point. There's no evidence. No one knew where Katelyn was. There's no leads on the case. And eventually months started passing by where there was still no update. Now, on September 19th, 2011, investigators decided to bring in some people related to the case to do some voice stress analysis tests on them. Have you guys heard of that?
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like that can't, like a polygraph, that can't be reliable. If you bring me in for questioning for a voice stress analysis test, I'm failing.
Yeah.
I'm guilty.
Yeah, I'm stressed all the time.
All the time. And then to be brought in for questioning, it's like you could pin anything on me.
Yeah, just like a polygraph, those are like even less reliable. Isn't that right? Yeah.
Okay, so the two people that they brought in for this voice stress analysis test was fiance John and then friend Brad, the one that had come over to watch the movie. Now, apparently fiance John had mentioned Brad's name to police before. Look, fiance John out here just throwing out names at this. He's throwing his friends out of the bus. And he had questioned whether Brad might have had something to do with Katelyn's disappearance once John had gone out for the party. Like maybe Brad came back. But funny enough, both fiance John and friend Brad failed their tests, like we just said they probably would. Both of them had the same excuse, just that they were nervous. But because both of the men's alibis had checked out, the police decided to clear them and release them.
So why even make them undergo the test anyways?
If you're going to fail and then just let them go anyways. After those tests, for about 2 years, the case just sat still. No evidence, no Katelyn, no leads. About 2 years later, on April 10th, 2013, Indiana State Police received a phone call from a man named Andy Hicks. Now, this Andy dude was searching for scrap metal along a road in Cedar Grove, which is like a few towns over. According to the police call, Andy was at this dump site that was off of a like rural road. And he saw it, pulled over to search for metal. And while searching, Andy came across skeletal remains. They weren't even buried in the ground. They were just mixed around with the trash. The human skull, though, that they found was wrapped up in a plastic bag. Once the state police arrived on the scene, they found that a black tarp had been placed on top of the remains, but were very quick to notice that on the skull, apparently it still had most of its teeth attached to the jaw, and some of the teeth were extremely crooked. Unfortunately, Katelyn Markham was known to have a few crooked teeth. A week later, after an autopsy report was performed on the remains, it was determined that the skeletal remains were that, in fact, of Katelyn Markham. After the news went public, fiancé John put out the following statement on social media, and it read, quote, "I was the only on the news before because I wanted to find her. Now that it's done, I have no interest in putting myself on camera. I would like to mourn my loss and try to put my life back together," end quote. On the second anniversary of her disappearance, her death was officially ruled a homicide, but the cause of death was listed as undetermined. But now that the investigation had been changed from a missing person to a homicide, a new agency was able to be brought into the picture, the Indiana State Police, which obviously we know the more agencies or the higher up ones that come in just benefits the case overall. So according to the autopsy report and the crime scene investigation, investigators think that Katelyn could have potentially had her wrist cut prior to her death. And that was because, according to the remarks that they found on her wrists, but also could have occurred post-death. So they weren't really sure. They were able to determine from fragments on her body that she had been killed in a different location and then eventually moved to the dump. Investigators also decided that because Katelyn's head was covered with a bag, there was a good chance that the killer knew Katelyn and didn't want to have to look at her face post-murder on the car ride to the dump, which was about a 30-minute drive outside of town. The first person that the Indiana State Police decided to question was Daddy Dave. Now, Daddy Dave actually had never been looked into by the Fairfield police, but that's okay because he had an alibi. He said he was with his girlfriend the night of Katelyn's disappearance, which turned out to be true. There was proof of it. And Daddy Dave also passed a polygraph test, which we never see. And I don't need to comment on polygraph tests, but I love a passing.
I know when someone fails, I'm like, okay, whatever. If they pass, I'm like, okay, cleared.
See, I'm like, oh, they're guilty.
We're cherry picking over here.
Yeah, we like Daddy Dave. We like Daddy Dave. So, okay. So anyways, the Indiana State Police cleared Katelyn's dad from the case. The next person the state police decided to question was fiancé John, rightfully so. But because the Fairfield police had questioned him before and cleared him, and there was no new evidence in the case, like physical evidence, the state police just went ahead and cleared him right away. Love that. Don't know why. A body had been found in between his last questioning and this one. So
don't cross his name off yet.
Yeah. So on April 10th, 2014, two of Katelyn's friends went out to the dump site where her remains had been found. And when they got there, get this shit, when they arrived, they were horrified to find that there were still some remnants of Katelyn's bones and body at the scene, which blows my fucking mind. Can you imagine?
Yeah, how are you going to investigate a homicide? You don't even have the whole body. You left it there.
Don't know how the police missed that. It just doesn't really make sense. But when Daddy Dave heard about it from the friends, because those friends were like, we're calling Daddy Dave first. We're not calling the police. Obviously, the police sucked on this one. He actually drove out to the dump site and called a nonprofit organization called the Texas Equisearch team to come rake the dirt in the dump to see if there were any additional remains or evidence they could find. But they didn't find anything else than what was left there and the girls found. Now, the Texas Equisearch, by the way, is a nonprofit organization that helps families search and recover their loved ones. It was after this whole shit situation that happened that Daddy Dave once again was like, I think for like the third time at this point, he went to the Fairfield police and begged for them to change the team that was working on Katelyn's case because they had failed him in so many different ways. And I guess this time around, his request worked because the police chief put a team on Katelyn's case that weren't there before. Now, around the exact same time, an anonymous person put up a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of Katelyn's murderer. And this same person, this anonymous person, hired a private investigator to help investigate the case. This private investigator, his name was J. Ryan Green. He was out of Florida, went up to Ohio to help. And I want to know who this anonymous person is. I still don't know to this day, because they're obviously very dedicated in finding out who killed Katelyn if they put up 25 grand and hired an investigator. Like, that's crazy.
Props to them, though.
So this private detective, Detective Green, He pretty much hopped on the scene immediately. The first thing he did was interview the last people who saw Katelyn alive, which we knew or know is fiance John and friend Brad. Friend Brad agreed to do an interview with Detective Green. And during the interview, Brad mentioned that he drove this like blue greenish Saturn car and that he had sold it a few days after Katelyn's disappearance. And then Detective Green, doing what the police department hadn't done, he went out and found this car. He literally bought the car back from whoever friend Brad had sold it to. And he was like, I'm going to have a forensic analyst to, like, do a test on the car. He's already doing more than the police had done before. So he decided to get the forensic analyst done on the car. And that's because he also did an inspection of it himself. And in the trunk, he found dark stains on the carpet. Not a good look, friend Brad. So while waiting for the forensic results, Detective Green moved on in his investigation and began talking to Daddy Dave. Now, Daddy Dave at some point said, "Hey, Detective Green, you need to talk to fiance John." And that's because Daddy Dave apparently wasn't the biggest fan of him. And it wasn't because John was a bad person or anything, but it was because he was very lazy and didn't seem to have any life goals ahead of him. And Katelyn did. And so Daddy Dave thinks fiance John was like maybe a little bit jealous of that and like that Katelyn was doing well for herself. While talking to Detective Green, Daddy Dave realized how weird his initial phone call with fiance John was, which I feel like you guys probably picked up on as well. If you remember, fiance John left his work that day that Katelyn hadn't texted him. And on his way to Katelyn's house, he called Daddy Dave and was like, "She's missing." Like he wasn't even home yet. He wasn't even at the home. He didn't know she was gone. And he had called Daddy Dave and been like, "Hey, Katelyn's missing." And that's when Daddy Dave started calling her and her friends. And then they met at Katelyn's house and saw that she wasn't home.
I feel like that happens so much in investigations where they figure out that people are talking about things that nobody should know about early.
Right. And you just don't catch on it like yet. Not only that, but around the same time, love this, some of Katelyn's friends began going back through fiance John's social media posts and felt like a lot of his posts and statements during the time of Katelyn's disappearance had been rehearsed and planned and almost like they were like pre-scripted. Now, I love that because I know if one of us ever went missing, first of all, it wouldn't be the police that found us. It would be one of us because we know the dirt, we know the tea. So while still waiting for the car forensic results, Detective Green began looking into the dump because it was in such a remote area. He said that whoever had dumped Katelyn's remains in this area had to have known the location because it was almost quote unquote too remote for it to be a random dumping that a person found. So now here's a random fact that may sway you one way or another, but this dump was actually only about 4 miles away from fiance John's family home in Indiana. Coincidence? Not too sure. I don't think I said this before. Fiance John, his parents are divorced. So remember, he lives with his mom near Katelyn. He's like walking distance from her. His dad apparently had a home in Indiana, and it was only a few miles away, the dumping ground from Indiana.
So what house did he go to that night at like 2 a.m. and watch TV at?
His mom's. But they're just kind of saying like if you put in your GPS from his mom's to his dad's, you would have driven near the dumping ground.
Got it.
We'll go back to the TV thing too, Kylie, in just a minute. I see you catching on. So Detective Green ended up meeting with fiance John about 5 separate times in the year of 2014. And during one of those meetings, it was the first time that fiance John had said out loud that Katelyn had been mad at him the night that she went missing. By the 5th meeting of the two of those together, John started to get feisty and aggressive towards Detective Green. He was pretty much just pissed off at this point that years had like passed from Katelyn's death. And people were still coming at him like he could have had something to do with it because he had been cleared by the police. On February 27th, 2014, fiance John agreed to do another polygraph test, and this time to do it with Detective Green. And once again, he failed it. At the exact same time, the forensic testing from friend Brad's former car came back, and unfortunately, they said it didn't have enough DNA evidence in it to be extracted, so they weren't able to determine whether or not it was blood. So it just came back as undetermined, which that sucks. If you can't tell me whose DNA it is, at least tell me it's blood or not.
Yeah, you think there'd be a test. Hey, this is blood. This is not blood. At a minimum.
Right. So that's frustrating. But a year later, the anonymous person who had donated money towards the reward and had also paid for Detective Green had ran out of money. So Detective Green's job was done. He took all of his findings and his interviews and he turned them into the Fairfield police. And ladies, what did the Fairfield police do? Nothing. They took Detective Green's findings, put them in a folder, and set them aside. They didn't even open the folder. Fortunately, Daddy Dave once again came to the rescue and put pressure on the Fairfield police about how shitty they were handling the case of his daughter. And in 2016, the Butler County Sheriff's Office decided to take over the case from them. The very first thing the Butler County Sheriff's Office did was listen to Fiancee John's 911 call and do a voice analyst test on it. And wouldn't you know it, Butler Detective Joe said that it was obvious that Fiancee John had been lying in his 911 phone call. They found out that also Fiancee John's phone had actually been turned off 3 minutes before Katelyn's on the night of her disappearance and before he went to his friend's party. So like there's a few things that these people were like, we immediately did this. You guys should have done this right away. Oh, and also remember how Fiancee John told the police he sent her a good morning text at 4 a.m.? That never existed, never happened. And like they even looked at his phone records. So I'm confused on how that was missed. Pretty much within a month of taking over the case, the Butler County Sheriff's Office publicly announced that they had a new person of interest in Katelyn's death, but at the time they didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest. We now know that this person of interest was in fact Fiancee John Carter himself. This part's a little shitty, but 5 more years passed. 5 more years without any, without any movement in Katelyn's case. Daddy Dave and his girlfriend have continued to press the police for any updates, continued to spread awareness about Katelyn's death. But good old Fiancee John, though, he had moved on with his life. He moved, he married a new woman, he had a baby, and he got a job not at the pizza delivery place, but he started working as an instructor at a glass blowing facility that he used to go to for fun with Katelyn. And then, in 2018, a new case happened in Butler County.
Oh, no.
Swerve for you here.
Oh, no.
In July 2018, 23-year-old Ellie Wyke went missing and her skeletal remains were found 2 months later in a field near the home of her ex-boyfriend, Michael Strauss. Now, Michael ended up being arrested for Ellie's murder, and he was sentenced in 2019 to only 17 years in prison. Really crappy. That being said, people pretty much immediately pointed out the similarities between Ellie's death and Katelyn's death. The girls were around the same area and they were the same age. So not to mention, there's also a picture now circulating on the internet that showed Katelyn's old fiance, John, and Ellie's ex-boyfriend, Michael, hanging out at a party together in the past as well. So fiance John and killer Michael knew each other. And then on top of this, one of Michael's cellmates in prison told the guards that Michael had confided in him that Ellie wasn't the first person he had ever killed. So putting all of those pieces together, the lead investigator for the Butler County Prosecutor's Office, Investigator Paul, asked the head prosecutor to look into the connection between the two cases. He was granted permission to do so. And for the following 3 years, we're hitting years at this point, people. Like, it ain't taking months, it's taking years to do shit. So for the next 3 years, Investigator Paul worked on connecting the two girls' cases. At some point, they were able to locate a photo online that was time-stamped, and they were able to prove that on the night of Katelyn's disappearance, the ex-boyfriend of Ellie's, Michael, was at a party until around 4 a.m. So it cleared him of Katelyn's death. But that being said, Investigator Paul wasn't done investigating, so he decided to look into friend Brad again. Brad had pretty much been questioned by all the police investigators in the past. He told the same story to Investigator Paul that he had always said. He took another polygraph test and failed. But that being said, he was cleared because polygraph tests don't mean anything. After clearing friend Brad, Investigator Paul found himself still circling over and over fiance John's name. He felt like there were just so many misconnections in this case. A lot of the police departments and private investigator had seen but John just kept getting cleared because there was no physical evidence. So some of these missed connections to fiance John are apparently there were deleted texts between him and Katelyn on the night that she went missing. When John was asked about it, he said that he just wanted to free up some storage in his phone. And also, apparently, the Fairfield police had written down that when they originally interviewed John after Katelyn went missing, he had scratch marks on his neck. But John claimed that they were from shaving. But according to investigator Paul, when he saw a picture of fiance John from the Fairfield police on the day he was questioned, the scratches on his neck looked nothing like shaving marks, and they were like really low on his neck. So like it couldn't have been you don't shave down here. So investigator Paul brought in John for questioning, and for a third time, John took a polygraph test, and wouldn't you guess it, he failed again. The dude can't pass one to save his life. Apparently this time though, fiance John had failed so badly on his polygraph test that it almost immediately proved to investigator Paul that John was guilty of Katelyn's murder. So investigator Paul began following up on tips from 2011 that apparently the Fairfield police just never got around looking into. And one of those tips came from Katelyn's co-workers who had apparently called the Fairfield police and told them that recently Katelyn had been talking about how her wedding to John was most likely going to be canceled and that they would be breaking up soon. Another tip came from the friends that attended the Sacred Hearts Festival with fiance John and Katelyn the day before her disappearance. And these friends said that it was very obvious the couple were on the verge of breaking up and that they didn't talk the whole night, but that John had been acting like nothing was wrong. And then another tip was actually from Katelyn's direct next door neighbor who had reported, this is a lovely one. The next door neighbor had reported to police that the night that Katelyn disappeared, she had heard fighting going on in Katelyn's house, which is kind of a big deal. And when investigator Paul went to go talk to this next door neighbor, she said that she remembers hearing a woman yelling stop multiple times, and then it sounded like someone was getting thrown up against a wall. So yeah, all the tips don't look good, but there still wasn't any physical evidence to prove John was guilty of anything. And the dude even had an alibi that checked out, remember? He had friends at a party say that he was there until 1:45. And then his personal computer proved that he had watched a TV show from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. But after investigator Paul went through fiance John's computer records, he found that the following day, John had looked up summaries of the apparent TV episodes he had been watching from 2 to 4 a.m. So in a way, he could have just put the show on his computer, pressed play, and left. While going through more records from the Fairfield police initial investigation, there was a record that said 3 teenage boys had actually called in a tip to the police station saying that they had seen fiance John out and about after 2 a.m. on the morning of Katelyn's disappearance when he was supposed to be back home and watching TV. Investigator Paul tracked down these dudes, these teenagers. It's like 10 years later, and they told him exactly the same thing. They had it ingrained in their memory. And they said around 2:30 a.m., they were outside one of their houses, which was across the street from John's house. And they saw 2 cars drive by with no headlights on. And these boys assumed that the cars were police officers or like undercovers. So they hid in bushes while the cars drove by, teenage boys. But that's when one of the boys realized that they knew the car. It was John's car. And then the other one was a blue Saturn, which we now know belongs to John's friend John. Now, I don't know if you guys remember, but Fairfield police officer Sandy Spears was immediately suspicious of friend John, but she wasn't able to nail anything down on him. She just felt like she got the weird, like the heebie-jeebies from him, basically. Now, these boys remember clear as day, basically, that fiance John pulled into his house's garage, shut the garage door, a few minutes later, opened it, pulled out, and drove away. When he drove away, friend John followed him down the street. And after the 2 cars passed the end of the street, that's when they both turned their headlights on. So basically, it seems like the guys didn't want to be seen in their neighborhood, like being out and about driving. So investigator Paul tracks down this friend John, and decides to bring him in for questioning. And what's kind of crazy is that John was questioned at the very beginning of this whole investigation, but he never actually gave an alibi to where he was the night of Katelyn's disappearance. So when friend John talks to investigator Paul, he's like very shaky, he's very nervous. And he said that he had been working a shift at Applebee's that night when Katelyn went missing. And after his shift, he went home for a little bit, but then returned to the restaurant and hung out with some coworkers until like 4 a.m. But get this, I don't know how investigator Paul does it, but he does it. He tracks down those fucking Applebee coworkers. And every single one of them was like, no, John never came back to the restaurant after his shift because we hang out at the restaurant all the time after shifts. And friend John wasn't like friends with any of us. So he would have never have come back to the restaurant. So just like that, in a short period of time, investigator Paul had kind of pieced together what he think transpired on the night of Katelyn's disappearance and death. Investigator Paul believed fiance John Carter killed Katelyn around the same time that her phone was turned off, which was around midnight in her own house. And then fiance John left Katelyn's house, went to his friend's party. That was his way of establishing an alibi. After the party, fiance John called friend John to help him move Katelyn's body into one of their cars, which we believe is the Saturn. After that, the two guys went back to fiance John's house so that he could go inside, set up his computer in his bedroom with a TV show, press play, and leave the house again. And that's when him and friend John moved Katelyn's body to her final resting destination in that dumping ground. After piecing all of this together and putting together his findings, investigator Paul went to the prosecution's office and showed them all of the evidence. They were able to get the Butler County Prosecutor's Office to sign off on a search warrant of John's family home. And that's where they found a large landscaping tarp inside that was identical to the one that was laid over Katelyn's remains at the dumping site. And not only that, but they also found a journal of some sort that fiance John had been keeping that showed writings of apparently like his guilty conscience. So I'm going to read you one of these, like, I guess you could say poem that fiance John had written in his journal. And this is before Katelyn's death. Okay. It's hard for me to say this out loud because the poem is like two people speaking. It's kind of like John and then John's conscience. All right. It reads, quote, "Deep down, I love her. No, you want to kill her. But I love her. She must die. I can't kill her. Yes, you can. No. Yes. How do you talk me into all of these things? I'm just that good. But you're bad. How can I kill you? You can't. You're right. About what? Everything." End quote.
That was not a good poem.
Sounds a little bipolar to me. Like
not
the
quite
good,
there.
the devil and the angel on your shoulder kind of thing.
Yeah.
In addition to this weird ass poem, they found other writings that suggested maybe fiance John had buried a person in his backyard at some point, and that he had also maybe had killed someone by cutting their wrists, which if you remember, they think maybe that's how Katelyn had died.
Mm-hmm.
While fiance John's house search warrant was going on, friend John was actually being indicted on perjury charges that came from what he had told investigator Paul. And funny enough, when the police went to go arrest friend John, he was working at the same Applebee's he had been working at for over 12 years now.
That must be an Applebee's record.
So on March 22nd, 2023, investigator Paul had the immense pleasure of arresting Katelyn Markham's old fiance, John Carter. John was actually teaching a glassblowing class when he was being arrested. And this class was for women over 80 years old. And when the cops showed up to arrest him, all these like old women started cheering while he was being arrested, which is funny to me because they had no idea what was going on. Like they don't know why he was being arrested, but they were cheering while he was being arrested.
Do you think they thought
Why?
it was like one of those stripper grams or whatever?
Or like a gag of some, I don't know, but they all started like, there's literally multiple articles that say like his class was thrilled and they were clapping during his arrest. So John Carter, being held on murder charges, somehow posted a $1 million bond, which is mind-blowing to me. And unfortunately, some of the other charges that were going to be brought up against John, like moving Katelyn's body, her remains, they had already passed the statute of limitations, so they weren't able to use those against him. And in June of 2024, just a few weeks before his trial was set to start, John took a plea deal, unfortunately. He pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter in the death of his fiancée, Katelyn Markham. And a month later, he was given Are you ready for this? A maximum penalty of 36 months in prison. That's 3 years, you guys. He was sentenced to 3 years for the murder of his ex-fiance. And because he took a plea deal, which was obviously a really shitty plea deal, I don't know who signed off on that one. Fiance John never had to disclose how he killed Katelyn, why, or any of the details.
What the
Silence.
fuck?
Yeah.
I'm at a loss.
36 months. As for Daddy Dave and the rest of Katelyn's family, ever since John Carter's sentencing, Daddy Dave has been pushing for the state of Ohio to pass something called the Katelyn's Law. The Katelyn's Law would ultimately raise the statute of limitations to be greater for any charges that stemmed from violent crimes, which I totally agree with this. The statute of limitations in the United States is always a hard one. It's state to state. But as of right now, the status of this law is on hold, but I will keep you guys posted if I hear any movement on it. As for our friend John Palmerton, for some reason, the perjury charge against him in this case ended up being dropped. But don't you worry, in July of 2024, he was arrested for a domestic violence charge and is currently serving time in prison. Our ex-fiance, John Carter, is expected to be released from prison on July 4th, 2027, so just 2 years from now. And unfortunately, that is the case of Katelyn Markham.
Disappointed in his plea deal.
Who signed off on that plea deal? Because that is absolutely ridiculous.
I guess looking back on it, there is a lot of circumstantial evidence.
You're right. There's no physical.
36 months is ridiculous.
That's absolutely fucking crazy. And they said that's the maximum in that state in Ohio. Anywho's, so that's my sad case for today. You guys want to jump right into overtime?
I got a weird email.
Ooh.
A weird email. And I will say it kind of scared me at first because the actual like message didn't pop up. It was just like the screenshots they sent. And turns out we have a new theory. Do you guys remember the Liz Barraza case? The woman who was setting up the garage sale in front of her house at like 4 or 5 a.m. and was like
Oh
assassinated.
my God.
On,
Yeah,
like,
that was one of my
cameras.
favorite cases.
That was such a good one.
That was such a good one.
insane. Someone, I don't know who it is, didn't leave a name. They have like a weird email address, sent me a message. They did drop some names. I won't say the full names. But basically, their theory is that there's this woman named Sheila who lived in the same neighborhood. Sheila basically went through a very messy divorce, had an abusive husband. A month before Liz was murdered, she moved into the house in the neighborhood. They had the same house number, but on a different street. And their houses kind of backed up into each other. And they sent screenshots of all the stuff. And Sheila has even been commenting on YouTube videos about Liz's case. And in one of them, she said on a news report, "Please find me. There's always a link. I am afraid I am the link." And this email I got theorizes that her ex-husband hired a hitman to get Sheila, and he went to the wrong house.
Wasn't that one of our theories? Because it was just so
Yes.
random that we were like, it could have been
Yeah.
the wrong person.
Well, because also, remember there was ring footage from across the street or something like
Yeah.
that.
Mhm.
And we thought it was a woman because they were wearing, it looked like a dress and she had long hair or something like that. Easily could have been a
Mhm.
cover up. But they were driving a truck and the truck was parked in the neighborhood, like basically that's hitman material, waiting and watching, you know? Now I will say this is really juicy because I multiple times in our old neighborhood would get shit delivered to our house that was for a house like 2 streets down that had the same number.
Yeah.
Like all the time. And so that's really, wait, I'm really curious, Kylie, who the fuck sent you this email?
It is anonymous.
And it's just screenshots?
They sent like a whole long paragraph. They sent me a couple links to YouTube videos that I checked out, a bunch of different screenshots. So I'll post them on the YouTube. But like a map, you could see like Liz's
Yeah.
house
Yeah.
and then like Sheila's house. Like they back up to each other. And then I got a couple of the court cases between Sheila and her husband and his charges. And then screenshots of her comments on some of Liz's videos. I haven't responded to the email yet. I needed to dig into it, but I thought that was very interesting.
Honestly, I would respond to the email
Yeah.
and being like, we would love to talk to you.
Yes.
It doesn't even have to be recorded if you don't want to be recorded. Like, you don't have to show your face or anything. But like,
Yeah.
I want to talk to, we should try to reach out to Sheila if that person isn't Sheila.
Yeah, because Sheila's, I guess, trying to get someone to
Look into it.
it.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was who did that case?
I did.
Do you love how I remembered all the details? That was a really good case.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah.
That is one of the ones that haunts me at night.
Yeah.
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah. And like, it was like 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. She was putting up yard sale stuff. That was
That one kind of reminds me of the fitness instructor I did that was killed she was doing a fitness instruction class like in the church, and that guy came in full SWAT gear and they caught him on the cameras, and he had like a weird gait.
Missy Bevers.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, the Liz Barraza case is episode 63. Yeah, Missy Bevers was episode 6.
Oh, wow. That was very early. Wow. Juicy email.
Yeah, I've been loving the leads we've been getting lately. We love a comment. We love a theory. So if you ever have any thoughts about any of our theories, have a new theory, please comment. It's our favorite to go and read that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, for a side note, not on crime talk, what is y'all's uniform?
Okay. Explain to the listeners what you mean about that.
Okay, what's your go-to outfit? Like, not specifically like this t-shirt with the whatever, like, but what is like your style, your go-to style? What did that even come up at just a minute ago? Uniform.
We were talking before the podcast about, oh yeah, I also we haven't publicly said it, but I'm pregnant, for all of our listeners.
Nice transition.
Who haven't seen it. Yeah, heard it. And we also found out it's another baby girl.
Woo!
So girl squad up in this bitch. And before the podcast today, we were talking about how I've been wearing those tennis dresses lately, those fitness dresses lately, and my bump. And then Kylie, like my bump in the dress. And then Kylie said, oh, my friend, Alex Smith, she's never seen her in anything but a tennis dress. And we were like, oh yeah, that's her uniform.
That's her uniform. Okay,
Yeah.
edit out everything I said before that, Kylie, because that was a way better transition into this conversation. But now I want to know what's y'all's uniform, because I definitely have a uniform.
My uniform is always yoga pants, the black yoga pants, New Balances, and a big thrifted vintage t-shirt.
Long sleeve, short sleeve t-shirt.
Short sleeve,
Short
big,
sleeve.
large, extra large. I get them in the men's section.
Ripped, maybe some dye on it.
They're bleached. They're ripped. They're old.
I'm literally have it pictured in my head right now.
Yeah. Kylie likes to be warm. Even though she's in Florida, she likes to be warm.
Oh yeah. All black.
Yoga pants.
All black.
All black. Yeah. Regardless of where we go. We will be hiking in fucking Arkansas and she's wearing a full black outfit.
Yeah. The inconspicuous woman in black. That's Kylie.
Yeah. Yep.
Are we talking about our current uniform? Because mine would be tennis dresses if I'm leaving the house.
No, you're different because you're pregnant right now. What is just like your go-to, like you're comfortable in it, you know?
I mean, it's workout gear. So
Athleisure.
Yeah. Like I was definitely athletic shorts, like running shorts, and then an oversized t-shirt.
Yes.
But I tend to do the less graphic t-shirts. I like more plain Jane ones. Like they have like an oversized jersey shirt from like Old Navy, and I have them in like 10 colors.
Yes. Okay.
And then you'll most likely always find me barefoot.
Pregnant housewife, barefoot girl. Okay.
Yeah. But right now, being pregnant, if I'm leaving the house, I'm wearing a tennis dress. If I'm in the house, I'm sweats all day. But I don't know anymore. Holly, do you have a uniform?
Yes. And it's hard for me to stray away from it. That's why I like dressing in the winter more. Mine is definitely shorts, a pullover, long sock, like not long socks, but like the short socks, you know?
Yeah.
Tennis shoes. I can't get away from it.
What kind of shorts?
Like athletic shorts.
And a pullover like a sweatshirt?
Yes, like a pullover sweatshirt. It's literally what I'm wearing right now.
You are a sweatshirt kind of girl.
I'm a sweatshirt girl because I'm cold everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Think like Princess Diana stepping out, you know, like when she's got on those like athletic shorts. I'm not comparing myself to Princess Diana, obviously. But I'm saying, you know, that iconic picture of her where she's got her athletic shorts on, the pullover.
It's a
long
great
socks,
picture.
tennis shoes.
Everyone wants that outfit.
Yeah.
I actually don't think I've ever seen you in regular socks.
And I'm so sad for them to ever go away if they do, because I'm so stuck on them.
You know what? I think I kind of hate biker shorts.
Yeah, I kind of do too.
I wear
They're
a lot of biker shorts. But maternity ones, they're so fucking comfy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
What
if
else am I
you're-
supposed to wear?
You're in a different era. You're
in
not
my own-
included
yeah.
really in this.
Anyways, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. If you want even more information about our case today, visit us on our website at overmydeadpod.com or check us out on social media at Over Our Dead Pod, Over My Dead Pod. Also, a side note, we will be attending CrimeCon this year in Denver. So if any of you listeners are going to be attending, let us know. We'd love to meet up with you. We'd love to see you guys. But just it'd be cool to meet anybody else going to CrimeCon. So just let us know. And we will see you next week with another episode. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.